Smokey and the Bandit grabs you by the collar, floors the gas, and dares you to keep up. What looked like a simple car chase comedy turned out to be one of the most chaotically brilliant productions in Hollywood history, held together by loyalty, improvisation, and one legendary mustache. We're breaking down 15 wild facts that'll make you see the whole film differently, and stay for the bonus at the end. It changes everything. The list starts now. Number 1, a script so bad, it almost wasn't a script. Before Burt Reynolds ever fired up the Trans Am, he fired off some honest feedback. When Reynolds first laid eyes on the screenplay for Smokey and the Bandit, his verdict was blunt. It was the worst script he'd ever read. Director Hal Needham hadn't typed it with any professional polish. He'd scratched the whole thing by hand, on yellow legal pads and pencil. Loose ideas, half-formed scenes, fragments of dialogue, and a tone that felt less like a screenplay and more like a very ambitious bar napkin. There was barely a plot, barely any structure, and way too many vibes. Reynolds told Needham exactly what he thought, and then said yes anyway. He had a gap in his schedule, but more importantly, Needham wasn't just some director. He was Reynolds' longtime stunt double, the guy who had spent years getting slammed into windshields and dropped off buildings so Burt could look effortless on camera. Saying yes was loyalty, repaying a debt that years of bruises and broken bones had been quietly building up. Now here's the glorious irony. That terrible pencil-scratched excuse for a screenplay became the movie's greatest weapon. The total lack of structure freed the cast to be genuinely spontaneous. What should have been a catastrophic liability turned into the most freewheeling production of the decade. And that worst script Burt Reynolds had ever read went on to become the second highest-grossing movie of 1977, beaten only by Star Wars. Number 2. Basically, the whole thing was made up on the spot. If Smokey and the Bandit feels less like a tightly plotted film and more like talented people having the time of their lives with a camera pointed at them, there is a very specific reason for that. According to Sally Field, there was virtually no usable script when production began. Not, we changed a few lines. She meant there was almost nothing to follow at all. Field took the role on a straight-up leap of faith. Reynolds had personally called and asked her, and she was ready for something light. Once cameras rolled, scenes were invented in the moment. Actors improvised dialogue. Genuine reactions stayed in the cut. If something landed, it stayed. If it didn't, they kept driving. The script supervisor reportedly gave up tracking dialogue changes altogether. Keeping continuity on a production this deliberately chaotic was like trying to alphabetize a hurricane. And that total creative anarchy became the film's defining quality. The rhythm felt lived in. The chemistry felt real, because it was. The jokes landed because they sounded like things people actually say when they're having fun and misbehaving just a little. Smokey and the Bandit didn't succeed in spite of having no script. It succeeded because of it. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Number 3. Jackie Gleason invented Buford T, Justice, from scratch. If the rest of the cast was improvising, Jackie Gleason took that concept and catapulted it into another dimension. From day one, Gleason had near total freedom to build Buford T. Justice, however, he wanted, and he used every inch of it. One of his first demands was that Needham get him someone to talk at. Gleason told the director flat out he couldn't play the character alone. He needed someone to yell at, browbeat, and emotionally steamroll. That demand conjured Junior into existence, a character who wasn't in the original story at all. Gleason invented the entire dynamic on the spot. Needham later estimated that 80 to 90% of Buford's dialogue was made up in the moment. Lines like, "There's no way you came from my loins," weren't crafted punchlines. They were Gleason reacting in real time, pushing the character further off the rails with every take. The famous diner scene, where Buford unknowingly sits next to the Bandit, was Gleason's idea. He even directed Burt Reynolds mid-scene, telling him to keep wiping his eyes whenever the sheriff leaned close, selling how physically unbearable the man was to sit near. Buford T. Justice doesn't feel written. He feels like something that escaped. Number 4. The name Buford T. Justice belonged to a real cop. The name Buford T. Justice wasn't invented for the movie. It belonged to an actual Florida Highway Patrol officer, a man personally known to Burt Reynolds' father, Burton Milo Reynolds Sr., the longtime police chief of Riviera Beach, Florida. So the most over-the-top lawman in movie history was quietly carrying a real badge name the entire time. But the name was just the starting point. Reynolds grew up surrounded by Southern law enforcement. His father's world was full of officers who talked, ranted, and verbally demolished anyone who crossed them in colorful, relentless ways. That environment shaped everything about how Buford would eventually sound on screen. Reynolds later said his father supplied Buford's vocabulary. The word "sumbitch" was reportedly his dad's go-to term for anyone causing trouble. Buford may be exaggerated beyond all recognizable reality, but there's a foundation of real voices underneath the performance. He doesn't feel written, because in a very real sense, he wasn't. He was remembered. And the audience could feel the authenticity even while laughing at the absurdity. Number 5. Jerry Reed was originally supposed to play the Bandit. Here's a casting fact that reshapes how you watch the whole movie. In Needham's original vision, Jerry Reed wasn't playing Snowman. He was supposed to be the Bandit. The concept was a scrappy, low-budget B-movie with about $1 million. In that version, Reed, already a country music star with genuine charisma, sharp comedic timing, and that effortless Southern cool, was the lead. He was going to drive the Trans Am, crack the jokes, and carry the movie on charm alone. Then Burt Reynolds entered the picture, and everything shifted immediately. The film stopped being a B-movie and became a studio priority. Universal opened the checkbook. The budget jumped from roughly $1 million to well over $5 million. Bigger stunts, bigger expectations, and roles had to shift. Reed didn't get pushed out, he got repositioned. Instead of the Bandit, he became Cletus Snowman Snow, the big rig driving heart of the movie. It was a perfect fit. But the story has one final twist. When Reynolds declined to return for Smokey and the Bandit Part 3 in 1983, Jerry Reed finally got his shot at the title role. Snowman became the Bandit. So Reed was always supposed to get there. It just took 3 movies, 1 megastar, and a budget explosion to make it happen. Number 6. Sally Field was almost rejected for being not sexy enough. Every great movie has at least one moment where studio executives say something that ages instantly and horribly. For Smokey and the Bandit, that moment came when Universal decided Sally Field wasn't attractive enough to be in it. Executives only saw her as the wholesome TV girl from Gidget and The Flying Nun. They couldn't picture her as a legitimate romantic lead. Burt Reynolds disagreed completely. He'd watched Field deliver a devastating performance in Sybil, and knew she had far more range than anyone was giving her credit for. He pushed hard for her casting, and made it clear he wanted her. Field had her own reasons to say yes. She'd been boxed in by the TV Sweetheart label for years, and wanted to prove she could hold her own in a major film. The role was a chance to show audiences she had more gears than the industry believed. And it worked immediately. The chemistry between her and Reynolds was electric, and impossible to manufacture. The studio that almost blocked her casting watched her deliver one of the film's most enduring performances. Universal nearly vetoed Sally Field. Instead, they accidentally helped launch a career that would eventually earn her 2 Academy Awards. Number 7. Reynolds and Field fell genuinely in love during filming. By the time Smokey and the Bandit hit theaters, audiences could sense something real about how Burt Reynolds and Sally Field played off each other. That's because during filming, the two fell into a genuine romantic relationship that lasted nearly 5 years. It started right on set, built through long days on highways, and improvised scenes where the line between acting and real connection blurred completely. With so much dialogue invented in the moment, their exchanges often weren't performances. They were two people, genuinely, trying to make each other laugh. For Field, the relationship arrived at a turning point. Reynolds became one of her biggest champions, constantly telling her she was talented and capable of carrying a film. Field later said that confidence changed how she saw herself, not just as a performer, but as a leading woman. For Reynolds, the emotional weight went even deeper. Long after the relationship ended in 1982, he openly called Field the love of his life and referred to her as the one who got away. In a movie built on speed, noise, and horsepower, that genuine affection gave Smokey and the Bandit something no stunt coordinator could plan: a real heart underneath all the chaos. Number 8. The theme song was written in a matter of hours. Some films spend months searching for the perfect theme. Smokey and the Bandit did not. Needham told Jerry Reed he needed a song that explained the entire plot. The energy, the stakes, all of it in one track. Reed nodded, went off on his own, and came back just a few hours later. He sat down and played Eastbound and Down. By the time the last note rang out, Needham reportedly told Reed that if he changed a single note, he would personally end him, which was either the highest possible creative compliment or a very specific threat. Possibly both. The song earned that reaction. Eastbound and Down told the whole story in under 3 minutes. Long way to go, short time to get there, trouble behind, and trouble ahead. If you missed the plot while watching cars fly off bridges, the song caught you up immediately. It became completely inseparable from the movie's identity. You hear that opening riff, and you're already moving, already grinning, already mentally flooring a pedal. Even if you're parked on a couch, that's a theme song that doesn't just belong to a movie. It becomes the movie's heartbeat. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Number 9. Smuggling Coors Beer East was a real thing people actually did. Here's what modern audiences sometimes miss. The entire premise was rooted in something that genuinely happened. In 1977, Coors Beer wasn't available east of the Mississippi River, not because of any ban by name, but because Coors wasn't pasteurized and required refrigeration from brewery to drinker. That limited distribution to roughly 11 western states. Hauling it across state lines in large quantities without a distribution license violated alcohol distribution laws. No license meant no state taxes, which made you a bootlegger, whether you felt like one or not. People really did make Coors runs out west, loading trunks and truck beds to bring cases back east. It was one of the worst-kept secrets in America. Paul Newman was a known Coors devotee who demanded it on set. The beer had the kind of underground mystique that money can't manufacture. Needham's inspiration came from a real moment while shooting Gator in Georgia, when a crew member brought him some Coors from California. He stuck them in his hotel fridge, and then watched them disappear because the hotel maid had been taking bottles home to her boyfriend, since you simply couldn't get Coors anywhere nearby. That moment was the whole movie. Number 10. The Pontiac Trans Am became an American obsession overnight. Before Smokey and the Bandit, the Pontiac Trans Am was just another sporty option on the lot. After the movie, it was a cultural artifact. Watching that black and gold machine tear across southern highways with total confidence and zero apology made something click for audiences. The car stopped being transportation and became an identity. Sales told the story fast. In 1977, Pontiac sold around 68,000 Trans Ams. Within 2 years, that number exploded to more than 117,000. Showrooms were swarmed. Pontiac struggled to keep up with demand for the black and gold special edition Reynolds drove in the film. Pontiac's president was so thrilled, he promised Burt Reynolds a brand new Trans Am every year for the rest of his life. The deal only ended when the executive retired, which is honestly the most quietly corporate way possible to break a legendary promise. The Trans Am didn't just benefit from the movie, it was immortalized by it. Number 11. The movie sparked a nationwide CB radio craze. Smokey and the Bandit didn't just change what people drove, it changed how they talked. Before the film, CB radios were a trucker's practical tool for coordinating road conditions and locating law enforcement. After the Bandit, everyone wanted a handle. The CB boom had been quietly building since the 1973 oil crisis, but Smokey and the Bandit poured high-octane fuel straight onto it. Suddenly, the language of CB radio was everywhere. People who had never been near a semi-truck were talking like outlaw truckers on their morning commutes. Smokey Bear in the air. What's your 20? Negatory. Everyone picked a handle. accountants were rolling through suburban streets calling themselves Nighthawk with completely unearned confidence. Songs like Convoy shot up the charts. An entire movie followed in 1978. TV shows leaned into the lingo. For a few loud, chaotic years, America decided the best way to connect with strangers was by yelling into a dashboard radio at 70 miles per hour. And one film about beer smuggling is entirely responsible for all of it. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations. And tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Number 12. The famous bridge jump nearly destroyed the Trans Am. If you remember one image from Smokey and the Bandit, it's probably the Trans Am flying through the air over the broken Mulberry River Bridge, looking like gravity had been politely asked to take the day off. But that shot was a one-take gamble that even Hal Needham, one of the greatest stuntmen who ever lived, wasn't sure would work. The gap was too wide, the car too heavy, and 1970s physics were not on anyone's side. To make it happen, the crew added a liquid-powered rocket booster mounted in the rear of the Trans Am. Without it, the car wasn't clearing that gap. Some reports say the engine was removed or lightened to keep the nose from diving into the river. The front end was reinforced, weight was shifted, calculations were made. Then everyone stepped back and hoped the laws of motion felt generous that afternoon. The landing was so violent it bent the chassis and ripped the transmission apart. That Trans Am never drove again, but the shot worked. And that single moment became the film's defining image, the visual proof that this wasn't just another car chase comedy. This thing was going for it with everything it had, and worrying about the consequences later, which, come to think of it, is basically the entire philosophy of Smokey and the Bandit. Number 13. The crew nearly got arrested during filming. Most movies try to look realistic. Smokey and the Bandit was so realistic that actual law enforcement tried to shut it down more than once. Needham refused to fake it. He wanted actual speed, actual highways, and actual chaos. The problem was, nobody told the local cops. During one highway chase sequence, the crew was filming at full speed on a public road when a real police officer, completely unaware a movie was being made, drove straight into the action. The entire production halted while the crew scrambled to convince one very skeptical officer that this was a legitimate Hollywood shoot with actual permits. Meanwhile, stunt drivers and muscle cars sat on the shoulder trying to look innocent, which, if you've ever met a stunt driver, is genuinely not their strong suit. Eventually, the explanation landed and nobody was arrested, but the officer's cruiser and flashing lights had rolled right through the shot, torching the footage completely. The whole take had to be refilmed. And that wasn't the only incident. Local residents kept calling police to report what appeared to be actual high-speed crimes in progress. A black Trans Am tearing through town with criminal urgency, which was accurate in every detail except the criminal part. Needham later joked that the production probably caused more real police chases than it filmed fake ones. Number 14. A stunt nearly turned deadly during filming. For all its laughs, Smokey and the Bandit had one moment on set that stopped being fun immediately. It happened during the sequence where the Bandit drives through a Little League field to escape the police. On screen, it plays like reckless comedy. Cars, kids, chaos. Behind the camera, it almost became something much worse. During the stunt, the driver panicked and nearly lost control. The vehicle veered off its planned path and headed straight toward a group of child extras. For a few very real seconds, a lighthearted chase scene was on the verge of turning into every filmmaker's worst nightmare. Thankfully, nobody was injured, but Burt Reynolds later called it one of the scariest moments of his entire career. The scene still plays for laughs in the finished film, but knowing what happened behind the camera adds a weight to it that the audience was never meant to feel, and that the cast and crew never fully forgot. Almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Number 15. Burt Reynolds was paid more than everyone else combined. By the time Smokey and the Bandit went into production, one thing was crystal clear. there was no movie without Burt Reynolds. In 1977, Reynolds was the biggest box office draw in America. The Star Studios built entire productions around. Universal knew it and paid accordingly. Reynolds received a flat $1 million to star in the film. For a light-hearted car comedy with a handwritten script, that was an extraordinary number. His salary alone exceeded what the entire supporting cast and crew made combined. Sally Field, Jerry Reed, Jackie Gleason, everyone on the call sheet still came in under what Reynolds was earning. But here's where it gets truly interesting. Just 2 days before filming was scheduled to begin in Atlanta, Universal sent in what Needham would later call a hatchet man, a studio representative with one job: cut the budget by $1 million. Reynolds' salary was locked and completely untouchable. So when the budget got slashed, the knife hit the movie itself. Needham was left trying to shoot a car-heavy action film with roughly $3.3 million. The production leaned even harder into improvisation and momentum, which ended up becoming the movie's entire personality, though not exactly by choice. The gamble paid off spectacularly. A movie built on confidence and swagger, carried by a star who knew exactly what he was worth. The Bandit bet on himself. America paid up. Bonus: the studio nearly buried the film before anyone could see it. Almost nobody talks about this one. And it might be the most jaw-dropping detail of all. After Reynolds signed on and the budget grew beyond original projections, Universal Pictures got cold feet about the film's prospects. Internal discussions seriously considered limiting the release to a regional rollout in the South rather than going national. Some executives wanted to treat it as a specialty regional item, a curiosity for Southern audiences rather than a mainstream release. They were prepared to write it off before audiences everywhere had even had a chance to see it. Needham and Reynolds pushed back hard. Reynolds used every bit of his star power leverage to fight for a full national release. Universal, somewhat reluctantly, gave the film the wide rollout it needed. Smokey and the Bandit opened nationally. And within its first weekend, the studio's hesitation looked spectacularly wrong. The film went on to gross over $300 million worldwide against a budget of roughly $4.3 million. It outperformed almost every movie of its year except Star Wars. The film that Universal nearly buried in the South became one of the defining hits of the entire decade. And if the studio had gone with their instinct, you might never have known the Bandit's name at all. Outro. And those were 15 strange facts about Smokey and the Bandit. This movie had every reason to fail. Wrong script, wrong budget, wrong expectations. And it succeeded anyway by refusing to slow down long enough to second-guess itself. That's what makes it worth revisiting. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and drop a comment with the fact that surprised you most. And don't forget to suggest another movie that deserves a list of strange facts just like this one. See you in the next video.